Right, so thank God for the opportunity to share of the history of Resort Lautan Biru again. So I was burdened to do it because of what we have been hearing about the resort recently, and also the librarian Ling Ling passed me a lot of weeklies that she has compiled when Reverend Toh wrote about it. So thank God for the lively pen of Reverend Toh. So when I was reading it, I felt like, okay, this must be shared. And unfortunately, I'm just like a third party. I wasn't born in that era. I was born already, but I wasn't in the heat of the episode, the thick of the action. So I could only just share as like a reader. Okay, but then so this presentation, I will let Reverend Toh's words speak for themselves rather than a lot of my speech. Okay, so I just give a little bit of commentary here and there. Right. So to know about the resort, we have to understand who the man is, right? And we know it's Reverend Toh. But what kind of man was he? Okay, and how was the seed of Mersing planted in the first place? Okay, so we can read from 40 Years to Church Growth. He wrote before, okay, that when he was first installed as a pastor, he already came to a realization that a pastor's ministry was not confined to the four walls of his church. And you can see from this description that he felt that he still had a lot of time on his hand after having so many things to do in a week, right? And he just couldn't feel at ease, and he decided to actually launch out into the deep. So the deep would be Malaya. At that time, Singapore and Malaysia was Malaya, okay? So with the Great Commission on his heart, he and Deacon Xu Changtai, also commonly known as C.T. Xu, okay, they went all the way to Aloe Star in the north. And this was him 7 months after he was installed pastor. He was just only 31 or 32 years old. So very young and really full of zeal and energy. Okay, so this is a picture of Deacon Xu. Very hard to find his picture. I realize he must be quite a shy man. But thank God for this picture. Really, the two of them worked together very well. Okay, and so how did they evangelize? What was the mode of transport? In Deacon Xu's new car, okay, it was a Fiat Marmalade, right? I think this is a Fiat Marmalade. I couldn't find it, too old already. Okay, so altogether they had evangelized to about 60 villages and towns. And Mrs. Tan corrected me, because in Mersing I said that it was one of these evangelistic journeys that they met Eileen Cha, but no, actually it was in an ICC meeting. The Eileen Cha was there, and then they met her, and she, who had a burden, wanted to bring the gospel to Malaysia. She was from Hawaii. Okay, so her story can be read. Okay, so this is Eileen Cha. This also from the book 40 Years to Church Growth. Okay, her face is the young lady over there. Okay, so obviously in any missions work, we always target the children, and so she was really instrumental in bringing the gospel to the east coast of Malaysia. Okay, and so this is her. She went home to be with the Lord last year at the ripe old age of 100. Okay, she was buried in Singapore. So this is her story, Call to Asia. FEBC has a copy, so if you're interested to know how she from Hawaii could come to this part of the world, you'll be very good to read about her story. Okay, so to continue the story, so the three of them felt burdened to establish a gospel mission in Mersing, because there was really not a single church or missionary. So this is their description of what Mersing was like. This is the 1950s. So you can see it was just a jungle, basically. A jungle that's next to the sea. Okay, but yet they could find an appeal to this town, right? And so the last part of this slide, it says Mersing will have a future as a holiday resort. So that was then. Okay, so this is Mersing today. Okay, you can see actually when you first entered Mersing, when you are reaching Mersing, you will see a huge Hindu temple and a huge Buddhist temple, and they're very well maintained. It was so brightly colored. I can see how devoted the people in Mersing are to their faith. Okay, so that was 1950s, right? Then 44 years later, the thought of Mersing came back. How did it come back? So it came back further east of Malaysia, okay? So, but then we have this historic letter that Reverend Toh penned to the session members, okay? So in here, he told a story about how he had this dream for Ocean Resort. Okay, so it came from Kemaman first, all right? So in July 1994, the Kemaman mission work was started, right? So this was Dr. Wee then, okay? And then from Kemaman, they went out to Kuantan, okay? And so in Kuantan, we have to meet the Reverend John Ling, right? This is the late Reverend John Ling. And there was a property being purchased to develop a kindergarten. So because of this purchase of a property, Reverend Toh felt that there could possibly be a land also to purchase on the way from Singapore to Kuantan. Okay, so anyway, this is just some more pictures of Reverend Ling and Reverend Toh and even Mrs. Toh. Okay, so this is a map of the situation. Okay, so you can see that Singapore is at the far bottom, right? So Singapore to Mersing is just 100 miles. And then Singapore to Kuantan is about 210 miles. So it's really like right smack in the middle. Okay, so Reverend John Ling has a brother-in-law, okay, who actually deals with real estate. And one day, and because Reverend Toh told Reverend John Ling about this dream, so the broker came back and said, yes, there is a piece of land that's available for sale. And this is the details, or these are the details, right? This is how big it is, that's the price, and that's the total cost. And so, very excited, he wrote in a letter, he was supposed to go to the Reverend Jeffrey Khoo together on one early morning to view the land. But just before they could go, they got a call from the broker saying that, oh, sorry, the land has been sold already. So they were really very disappointed. But a week later, okay, a call came again saying, oh, there's another piece of land available. Would you like to see? But this time around, it's slightly more expensive. Okay, $1.50 more per square feet. But still, they thought maybe this was a lot leading, and they didn't want to just say no. So they prayed about it at the Tuesday prayer meeting. This time round, okay, the trio that's mentioned here is Elder Khoo Peng Kiat, Deacon Yu Pong Seng, and Reverend Toh himself. So on Thursday, they set off. And then at the wheel, on the way to Mersing, okay, the broker informed that the first piece of land, which was the cheaper one, is not available because the first buyer wrote the wrong date. Okay, so now the fastest finger first, right? Whoever can pay the deposit will be able to get the land. And even better news is that now it's cheaper. The seller wants to drop the price to 10 ringgit per square feet. So this is really very good news. You can save about 50K for the piece of land. Okay, so this is the situation. And so Reverend Toh said that on the way, I prayed, Lord, give us one that stands on the sea with good view and plenty of sea breezes. So when he reached that place, it was exactly what he dreamt of. Okay, so this is a very rare picture of him looking at the sea at Mersing, the South China Sea. Okay. Oh, can you calculate how old he is by now? 76 years old. Okay, this is how he looked like. Okay, this was the land. With the two roads there, then this is the behind him would be Resort Lautan Biru, the future Resort Lautan Biru. Again, this was his picture that he put in the weekly to start to appeal to members about his dream. Okay, so that same night he wrote that letter which you saw earlier, and so to cut the long story short, all of them went immediately after service, and all were really mesmerized by the sight. And the next day, they paid the deposit. They just had enough. And so they got the land first. So thank God for that. Okay, but they still must pay the balance in 3 to 4 months. And this would be the journey of how, of 4 years of asking for funds, or rather praying for funds to come to buy the land and then the building. Right? So, so it's by God's providence that the vendor needed immediate cash, so he was willing to drop the price, whereas the land all around was actually quite expensive. Okay, so this is God's providence. And Reverend Toh wanted Mersing to be open in October 97. So it was bought in 96 August, and then in October 97 they wanted to open it. Okay, and so they did have the funds coming in, okay, but they could not build immediately. Right? But just to show you the initial proposed plan, his dream was really a very big building. Okay, it was supposed to house 300 campers. Okay, but then because of certain logistic matters, the committee decided to shrink it down to this. So this was the latest sketch for 100 campers. Okay, and the sketch and the reality of it today is almost the same. It looks like it's quite similar. Okay, so what are the benefits of the Mersing Youth Camp? So Reverend Toh kept on writing in his weeklies, right? Why must we buy this? Why must we build this? Because number one, save heavy subsidies for annual Bible conferences. Number two, more retreats can be held. Okay, any fellowship group, any church can just come anytime. Okay, so it's really very convenient. And he really, really wanted it to be a mission station. Okay, where souls can come to be saved, or souls can come to have some spiritual refreshment. Okay, all very good spiritual benefit. And the pastor, if there's gonna be one, will redouble as a warden. Okay, and it's a very short drive from Gilstead Road. Okay, exactly from Newton to Mersing is 100 miles. Okay, right. So the reason for the delay, okay, was because of bureaucracy, okay, or administration. So that caused them to take 1 more year. Okay, and also the financial crisis 97. Okay, so with this retrospect, okay, he felt that God has a reason for the delay, and so maybe also be encouraged that when God delays, there always is a reason, right? And so with this delay, they're able to find the correct man for the job, right? And we know how important it is to get the right contractor to build your house, right? Okay, so the estimated price is 1.5 Sing million. Okay, so next, this is the 5 of them. So we mentioned the trio, Elder Khoo Peng Kiat, Deacon Yu Pong Seng, and Reverend Toh. There's also Victor Lu, the architect, who was also a deacon, the contractor, and I learned also that the last man there is Reverend David Wong. Okay, right? So having bought the land and then the construction was about to start, they have to do a groundbreaking ceremony. So Elder Toh Xiang Yao and Reverend Toh, they did it with Chanko, just to signify the starting of the construction. And isn't it amazing that on Easter morning, right after service, they all zoomed down to Mersing to witness this? Yeah, 65 of them. Okay, so this is the construction. Okay, see how firm the foundations are. Really, everything is very strong and good from the beginning. Okay, church van in the background. Okay, and Reverend Toh made sure that he paid a monthly visit to Mersing. Okay, just to also, in what they have to make progress payments. So from the church, they have to pay in stages to the contractor. And also he himself was also very involved in the construction. He must see what's going on. Right? And then finally in year 2000, there's a stone laying ceremony. That is Elder Toh Xiang Yao. And again, you see, it's a prosperous day. It's a Chinese New Year, day 3. Okay, people went. And you wonder, who will go? Okay, on Chinese New Year. Okay, but in the weekly, it was said that 180 people went to witness. Okay? Okay, so after the physical part, so we have the human part. Okay, the CFO here means Certificate of Fitness of Occupation. So actually now they can start to open for business. So that's about year 2000. And so thank God for the provision of Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Tan for Romping. They are also members of Gulai Besar BBC. Yeah, okay, and from here they have to start to furnish the interiors. Right, so he says that we have plenty of shopping to do to furnish the house. Right, and so these are the insides. Okay, how it's like. Buy aircon, buy beds, buy mattresses, buy chairs. Okay, and this Reverend David Wong, why I put here because Reverend Toh mentioned that he's a quite important man in the purchasing of materials and furniture. He being a Malaysian, he knows where the good deals are. And his wife, Ada Wong, was also used to be a hotel manager, so she was able to give a lot of advice on how to manage resort. See, so all this, how God bring the right people into your lives to build or to advance your dream. Right, and then also this is a testimony of provision of 10,000 ringgit. Okay, because Reverend Toh believed that this place must be self-supporting. Okay, and this is really by faith, and how time and again he will also testify of how people just gave this sum out of the blue to buy things. And he made sure that he bought the best things, because when you want a project to last long, you have to buy good stuff. You cannot just save pennies and then you lose pounds after that. So he made sure that the things were of good quality and that people can enjoy it for years to come. right? And then next, after the furnishment, then you have the living stones. Why living stones? Because his dream of it, wanting it to be a mission station, still stands, right? He wants it to have a spiritual dimension where people can worship the Lord in this place. Okay, and he intends to take charge of at least 2 Sundays of the month. Okay, so after preaching in live church, he has to go down to take the lead. Okay, so this is a very short history, right? So what I learned from reading, okay, so firstly, I learned about how so important it is for a member to share the pastor's burden and vision. So the pastor is always writing okay, about this project and even other projects. And I think as a church member, it's so good to align our burden for missions with his, because it's a very happy church then. And we want to give, we want to serve, and everything is just very good, okay, when we are able to share rather than to oppose. Okay, so I put this picture because this was also part of the land where there's a lot of trees, but who can see beyond the trees that there will be a place for a resort and for a gospel station. Okay. And the second thing I learned, or I was very encouraged by, was Reverend Toe's trust in God to provide. So you see, there was a 97 financial crisis. This is in 2000, where there was also a financial crisis. About 2000, I think there was a millennium bug or bomb, something like that, right? So Reverend Toe said that we as Christians have a powerful factor the world knows not. It is the factor of God, right? So when we seek to serve the Lord side by side, okay, we don't have to worry about him not providing. He will give, okay, but we must do our part. Right, and then another testimony is this. Okay, so there were many criticisms in the middle of this paragraph. Many people criticized him too. But he, as a leader, though lonely, but he will throw himself at God's mercies, and God really answered his prayers and encouraged him that 2 checks would come at this time to encourage him. Right? So you can see how people just constantly gave. Right? So so you can see Mersing Youth Camp has its own paragraph, okay, where people kept giving. Yeah. So you can see this in most of the weeklies. And you can see that eventually the cost came out to 2 million. And Reverend Toe, at somebody's advice, put out a thermometer to let members know, how far do we have left to give. Okay? And the third thing I learned is that you are never too old or sick to serve the Lord. So there was one weekly when he was writing about also the resort. He said that he spent 3 days in Changi Hospital, and then he said, with a new surge of life, I feel like a young man again. Should I not give back my life to him? Because the doctor said, you're good to go. Right? So he felt really renewed and said, yeah, I'm just going to go on. Not thinking of retiring or complaining of anything. Okay, so this was the first church camp, our first camp held in Mersing, and it was attended by Life Church. So because it's so many people, right? So we have to go to Timotel. Okay, these are the campers and the camp speakers. Then Timotel, which now you see is no longer there. The name is gone. It's just a facade. Okay, and FEBC also went. Okay, this is more recent. So faculty and students really enjoy a good time together, because during school time we don't really enjoy time together, but in Mersing we can. Right, and this is her, Mrs. Toe. She really likes Mersing and she likes to eat the goreng pisang too. Okay, this is 2004 when True Life had their first church camp as well, and this is in Mersing. And by this time, Reverend Toe is already 81 or 82. Okay, so he's still serving the Lord in his old age, never giving up and always pressing on. Okay, so this is the last retreat ever. Okay, this is us this year, 2 days ago. Okay, so thank you for listening, and thank God for this presentation.